All right, everybody. So, welcome back to another deck profile, and this is going to be one that has been in the making for a little while now, and I'm super excited to share it with you guys. So, this is going to be my Branded Bystial deck profile. I haven't updated this one in maybe like about a month or so. I could be entirely wrong about the timing, but I have made a bunch. And I mean a bunch of changes to this deck ever since. So this is operating almost entirely differently just because of how many things I had to swap around and things that I just felt weren't working so well before, and to make sure that I could keep everything at 45 cards at the most. So this is everything that I have come up with after about maybe like a month or like 3 weeks of playtesting and that kind of thing. So I'm definitely excited to share my results right here. As you can see, this is looking like a pretty spicy side deck, and I'm very excited to share that with you all. So now, like always, we're going to be beginning with the main deck, which is obviously here, so, as I mentioned earlier, going to consist of 45 cards. There are a lot of changes that I made, and I am going to go over everything as I talk about each card or every change in general that I end up going through. So first things first, I'm still going on double Blazing Cartesia. So when it comes to branded lost targets, I have a total of 4 in this deck, and quite frankly, with 4, I think that is the perfect number. And you could argue that there are probably other targets that would be better instead of Blazing Cartesia, but quite honestly, I think that 2 is pretty fantastic because you're not running polymerization in this deck anymore, since we're not running on the Edge package or anything like that. So just having accessibility to more of that definitely comes in handy, and the fact that she's searchable is also pretty fantastic. Not to mention that she is a tuner, which does actually come into effect in this particular deck profile, and we are going to talk about that very, very, very soon. But yes, I am still on double Cartesia, and I don't see myself changing that anytime soon, especially when Photon Hypernova comes out. Now, next up, we've got triple Albaz. So I have seen a lot of builds cutting this card down to 2, and I strongly disagree with that alternative. And that is because I'm always digging through so many Albaz, whether it's through Branded Fusion, whether it's through Albion, whether it's through whatever else. I just usually end up going through all 3 Albazes, and then I end up recycling it one way or another. But still, I end up going through all 3 copies of my Albaz through my combos, especially if you're going for the grind game. You want to make sure that you have enough Albaz to be able to resolve all of your cards, including Branded Fusion. That's super, super, super important. So this is why I like to run 3, and I wouldn't run any less than that. It's just how it is. Next, onto the Despia package. We've got triple Aluber, the Jester of Despia. And now, this isn't really something that I just like to bring up, but I have noticed that a lot of you have actually mentioned in that pretty much everything is max rarity. And yes, everything in the main deck and the extra deck is max rarity as it can be, because that's just how I like to run it. Now, with that said, completely off topic, Aluber is going to be your main searcher. You have to run this guy at 3. There's just no way around that. 3 copies of Aluber is how you get your way through getting through so many of your branded spells, including Branded Fusion, obviously, even Branded Opening if you want that, or even snatch yourself a Theater if you need that, in case you need extra fusions. So the whole purpose of this deck to me is really to try and make double Masquerade as consistently as possible, because what that usually means is that your opponent is not going to want to play through double Masquerade. So unless you have a Dark Ruler no more in hand or an evenly matched, they're just not going to want to play through this, and they're probably going to call it quits, which is what happens most of the time. So that's why I want to run 3 Aluber, and I did want to go as far as I possibly could with the Despia names, but there's going to be a change that a lot of you might actually disagree with. Now, this isn't going to be that change. This is going to be double Thespian Tragedy. I just really don't need 3. I think that just having enough room for 2 is really good enough here. It comes up enough times that I really don't have any issues with it. It's a fact that most certainly comes up quite a lot, so I very much appreciate it. Next up, and actually the final Despia monster is going to be Dramaturge. So after doing a lot of testing with this deck, I have come to the conclusion that in this particular build, Dramaturge just makes more sense than Ad Libitum, and I was kind of stuck between crossroads of which one I should include. It would have to be one or the other, and I decided to settle on Dramaturge because Dramaturge can bring himself back, which means that I can use him twice if I need to in order to go for those double Masquerade plays or even further fusion plays. So that's just a really cool thing, and this is also a negate on board for any extra deck monster that your opponent brings out, which is awesome. It's going to come in handy a lot. I've actually used that effect a bunch of times. So I just think that this effect is much more relevant than Ad Libitums right now, particularly because I don't favor Mirror Jade as much unless I kind of just have to go into Mirror Jade since I can't go for double Masquerade. But that's really just my style of playing this deck. I understand that a lot of people will agree with it, and that's totally okay. Now, with that said, this lineup I would not change whatsoever right now. Now, in the future, who knows? Maybe I'll end up favoring Ad Libitum, but I honestly doubt that. Next is Bestial Lubellion. I run him at 2 because you really don't need 3 copies. 3 copies is way too much. I did actually test him before at 3 copies and it's just way too cloggy. I understand people that just want to run this at 1, but I want to see this card more often than that, so I like to keep it at 2 because he is a pretty good searcher. He can bring himself out pretty easily and that kind of thing, so I do like Lubellion quite a bit. Now, one change that I did end up making is that I did bump Magnamut up to 3, and I think that the reasons for this should actually be fairly obvious, and it's just because this is such a great searcher, and obviously that DD Crow effect definitely comes in handy a lot, especially in this particular format that is filled with so many lights and darks. You want a way of getting rid of them, but this is also a fantastic searcher. It lets you search for any dragon monster and add that to your hand, which is why I think this card is so good in Dragon Link. But also, it is worth noting, with this card, you can add yourself a Fallen of Albas if you want. You can add yourself a Lubellion. You can add yourself an Albion if you want to. There's a plethora of cards that you can add yourself here, which is really, really, really awesome. So I like to have Magnamut at 3. Then I run 2 Druid Swarm. So I've actually changed my perspective on Druid Swarm. I thought that Druid Swarm would be the least useful bestial monster of the bunch, but it's actually been quite the opposite. He has really been doing a lot of work in games. So whenever I summon him and you get rid of him, you're going, like 95% of the time, you're going to trigger his effect unless you're dealing with Flounderies. But you will be able to ditch one of your opponent's monsters when you send to the graveyard for whatever reason. From the field, of course, so that's going to be awesome. Now, in my opinion, the least useful bestial monster is going to be Saronir. That is because I no longer run Branded Retribution, and that is because I didn't really think that Retribution was really that useful. I thought that sometimes it was a little bit bricky for me, at least. I guess this deck just isn't really built around Retribution so much, but what I was thinking is actually that, considering that the OCG ban list came out, I would probably end up having to bring Magnamut down to 1 if that does actually go into effect for the TCG at all. Then I would have to bring Magnamut down to 1, which would give me more room to include, let's say, a Retribution and things like that. But also, Branded Fusion was brought down to 1 in the OCG, which to me is kind of insane, but that's just how it is. But this is going to be my bestial lineup. It's going to be 2, 3, 2, 1. It's a small package in the grand scheme of things, but it's a package that works really well for me, and I definitely get lots of bestial action going as it is already, so I really don't see myself adding any more bestials, really, unless I need to fill in that deck space. Now, another fantastic card, and this card I've really realized its value over time, is Albion the Shrouded Dragon. This is both an upstart goblin and a foolish burial at the same time. This card is absolutely fantastic. Like, you can just ditch a Fallen of Albaz into the graveyard if you need a Fallen of Albaz in the graveyard, or you could do another monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz in the name as well if you really want that. So you could ditch Cartesia too if you want to, and then you shuffle it in, and then you put this card at the bottom of your deck, and then you draw 1 card. Like, you get both effects at once from this one monster, which is awesome. So this is another great search with both Magnamut and Branded Loss alike. So that's what I like to do there. And then lastly, for the Branded package, I like to, well, the Branded Loss package, I should say, is Tri-Brigade Mercourier. So I actually don't really use his negation effect all that often. It does come up sometimes, but what I really use him for is for banishing, like with Allure of Darkness, or if I have to banish him for one of my Bestials or anything like that, or if my opponent banishes him with any of the Bestial cards, if I banish him during a fusion. There's so many ways of banishing him and then getting that search effect again, which is really cool. So that's primarily why I use Mercury in here. I only run him at 1. I really don't need any more than that. And lastly, for the monsters, we've got triple Ghostbell and Haunted Mansions. So it is a little bit difficult to play against Bestials while you don't have the kind of protection that Ghostbell offers. Like, it just stops the Bestial plays for you, even though it is obviously just temporarily, but it definitely does help in helping you stay alive for one more turn. So Ghostbell is a staple in this deck. I do not see myself removing her at any point whatsoever, and I think that this monster lineup has honestly worked really well for me. It has been super consistent for me, so I just wouldn't have it any other way. Now, with that said, that's pretty much everything for the monsters here. So now we're going to be moving on to the spells and traps over here. So I ended up switching my prosperities out. So I used to play 2 prosperities, and now I actually have double triple tactics talent instead. Starlight Rare, I might say. And I have to say that this card was definitely the right change to make, because the thing about prosperity is that now that the extra deck is only getting tighter and tighter and tighter as time passes, and more cards come out and more support for Despia comes out, particularly when the Photon Hypernova comes out, I am going to value having so many of my extra deck monsters around. And with prosperity, I did miss some of the cards that I would end up banishing with it, so it just wasn't really so feasible anymore. So I wanted a solution that would work out a little bit better. And triple tactic silence I get to resolve pretty much every time, because my opponent always running Bestials or just monster responses or anything like that. Ash Blossom, which is still a thing, by the way. Don't underestimate it. So I always get the effect to draw twice, which is really cool. I really like triple tactic silent, and I think that was definitely the right move to make. I'm very glad that I went with this card and took out my prosperities. I do miss prosperity a little bit because it was such a nice card, but triple tactic silence just makes more sense here, so I go with triple tactic silence. Then I've got triple super polymerization. Now, this card is more self-explanatory. You do have some super poly targets in the extra deck, like Garura, and you also got Draco Sepalia, but you've also got some other moves that you can make, if anything. So this card is really cool to have around. I like to run that at 3, but this card I actually tend to side out for Mask Change 2. A little bit of a spoiler for the side deck, but we are going to be getting to that pretty soon as well. But super polymerization, super strong. Your opponent cannot respond to it, which is the saving grace of this card, honestly, and that's just what makes it so powerful. Now here we've got triple Allure of Darkness. So this card, it just helps you dig through your deck as much as possible. It is such a fantastic searching card, and you can activate it multiple times per turn thanks to it being an older card. So yeah, that is really awesome. Allure of Darkness is a very powerful card in the dark deck. Always run it. Then I've got triple Branded Opening. I did actually try testing this out at 2 before, but at 2 I just wasn't seeing it enough. I need to run this card at 3 for me to get the most out of it. And I would say that now I'm definitely getting the most out of it over here, because I get to do a lot more searching. I get to bring out a lot more Despia monsters out, and it's just a better way of going about it. I really like running 3 opening. So yeah, please, if you're running this deck, do not go down to 2, because that could very much end up hurting you in the long run. As I have tested in the past, 2's just not good enough. Then we got triple Branded Fusion. Hopefully this card will not get limited at all, because this deck does operate greatly off of Branded Fusion. Limiting it to 1 will make it so that you will really have to find resources to bring Branded Fusion back every time, and that's just going to be a little bit frustrating. It's going to mess with the synergy a bit, but it is possible nonetheless. Still, please, let's keep Branded Fusion alive. Now we're going to have a bunch of 1-ups here. So we've got Branded in red. You obviously do not need to anymore because we're not going for so many chimeras or anything like that. This card is very, very, very powerful even now, and I have been able to resolve it fairly often actually. Like, it hasn't been too bad. Now, next one is going to be Branded Regain because we are running a bunch of Bestials, so we are doing a bunch of vanishing, and then you get to put one of those lighter dark monsters back into the deck, then you get to draw, but it's got a secondary effect to let you special summon a Bestial monster, which is really cool. Now, the true MVP here is going to be Branded Loss, because this card lets you search every time that you fuse, once per turn, of course, for one of your Branded Loss targets, so like Albion, Mercurier, your 2 Cartesias, and it protects your fusions as well to make sure that they can't get negated unless your name is Ash Blossom. Then that's when it can get negated. But nonetheless, it's still a really good card. It's absolutely mandatory in this deck, and I just wish that it was hollow because it is my only comment. But here we've got Theater. Theater is one card that I simply cannot bring myself to take out of this deck. I've been thinking of switching this out with Branded in white. But the thing is that this card is more consistent and it's more generic because it is just constantly on the field and you can activate it every turn. Not to mention that you can use monsters that are in your hand as well, which tends to come up more than using monsters that are already in my graveyard, honestly, when it comes to this build, especially with how crazy the hand advantage is over here. Like, I often end up adding a bunch of cards all the way back to my hand with so much searching, and then adding Cartesia back to my hand from the graveyard and that kind of thing. Hand advantage is just really good, so I am better off using monsters in my hand and on the field to make other cards, which is why this card makes more sense to me. But I completely understand why a lot of people are going with the Branded Loss, Branded in white package, because it is still a very powerful card. Now, with that said, this is a non-branded card. This is going to be Harpy's Feather Duster. So this is going to be for those back row players out there, and also to be able to get rid of Branded Regain from other players and Branded Beast as well. Like, just to be able to have a way of outing those cards. And since I have that kind of room, I decided to keep this card in. And then lastly, we've got 2 traps, which are going to be Branded Beast. This is going to be for popping a bunch of cards. So primarily, you would want this card to get rid of D-Fissure or Macrocosmos, but those cards aren't really even being played all that much, even though they came back. And then we've got Branded Banishment, which is still a fantastic super polymerization-esque card that lets you fuse using your opponent's monsters, but you get to special summon a fusion monster or a Despian monster from your graveyard. So you do get to do quite a bit there. Branded Banishment is a must. Branded Beast in this deck is also kind of a must. But let's see how it is when Photon Hypernova comes out, because it should be kind of a blast. Now, with that said, that's going to be pretty much everything for the main deck. As I said, that is going to be 45 cards. But now we're going to be moving in onto the extra deck, and then we're going to talk about the side deck a bit. So first, I've got Mass Hero Darklaw. So as you can see, I do not have Mass Change 2 in the main deck. It is going to be in the side, but Darklaw is going to be a very important card. I'm actually going to bring it up here. So Darklaw is going to be a very important card when it comes to dealing with a lot of graveyard reliant decks. So this is particularly good against Branded, well, no, not Branded, but Tier Ishizu, which is why this card is in here. It's just an absolute must, and it has been so incredibly useful and so easy to make. So usually I tend to side out the Super Polys to bring out Mass Change, and then that will allow me to use Mass Hero Darklaw. So that's actually pretty cool. I like it. It's pretty strong. Next is Alba Lunetis, the Abyss Dragon. So this card is mostly, honestly, kind of a dump. I just use it for Mara Jade to send it to the graveyard for the most part. But there have been times where I have actually summoned him and I have been able to contact fuse. They're few and far between, but when it does come up, it comes up, and it comes up pretty strong. So I do like having Alba Lunetis. Next is Guardian Chimera. So this card is maybe not played as often, but this is still a really strong card. People still fear seeing this card today, which is a good reason to run it, honestly. Guardian Chimera is still really good. And then we've got double Mara Jade over here. So when it comes to Mara Jade, in this case I'm running 2, but I'm thinking of bringing it down to 1 when Photon Hypernova comes out with the new support. So we will see what ends up happening there. But 2 Mara Jades has been working out pretty well for me, I would say. And we've got one Lubellion. Now, this I would not change. Lubellion is really just good enough at 1. I don't need any more because you can just recycle him and put him back in the extra deck to bring out Mirror Jade if you really need that. Or you could just use his effect to bring out other monsters if you want to. So it is really cool. What I love about Branded Despia or Despia Bystial, Branded Bystial, is that you can get super creative with your plays. It's not a linear deck. It lets you do so much, which is why what I absolutely love about this deck. Next, we've got double Albion over here. I really don't need 3. 2 comes up, but I do end up using all 2 of these. So I understand people who run 3. I'm perfectly fine with 2 over here, so I'm going to keep these at 2. Now next, we've got double Masquerade, which is going to be the MVP over here, the card that I mostly try to go for because it's pretty much an auto win from there unless your opponent has a board breaker like Dark Ruler No More and that kind of thing. But even then, this is still a really good card, and it can special summon itself back in case of anything too. But you do not get the burning effect anymore, so there is that. Then we got Despian Quiritus. This card is very powerful and pretty much stresses your opponents because it means that they likely will not be able to do very much. Just considering that you can lower their monster's attack to 0 as long as they're not level 8 or higher fusions. So this is super cool. And its effect to be able to special summon one Despian monster, one Fallen of Albaz from my deck is really good. Like, it allows for quite a lot. So this card is really flexible. Then at this time, I am running Draco Sepalia, but I'm not sure really for how long this is going to remain. I don't really go into Draco Sepalia all that often. I do sometimes, but I don't know. This might be one of those cards that I end up switching out for something else. But so far, it has been a pretty decent card, I would say. Not really great, but it's been okay. When I get to summon him, he's been pretty good, but I don't summon him all that often, honestly. Now we've got Garua. Now this guy is definitely really good because he interrupts a lot of your opponent's plays, especially if they're running a bunch of bestials. If you're dealing with, for example, a bunch of tier elements monsters, you will be able to use their monsters to make Garua, which is super, super cool. So you could definitely steal the show from there. So yeah, I very much like that. And it's also a level 6, which means that you can use him to synchro summon into my buddy, my pal. This is Baron de Fleur. So I am finally running him in here, and I actually think that he's really good in this deck because Cartesia is a level 4 tuner. And it's so easy to get her back onto the field. It's so easy to get her back onto your hand. Just recurring that resource is super easy. And then having so many of your bestials being level 6 and even having Garura being level 6 does make things a lot easier for being able to make Baron. And when this comes up, it definitely hurts your opponent quite a bit. They absolutely hate it. Doctors hate him. So lastly, the last card in my extra deck is going to be Dark the Dark Charmer over here, just in case, of course. I just run him in case I end up needing him. It has come up every now and then, but I haven't been too successful with Dark so far. But I think that I really just need to play more games in order for me to get to that point. But yeah, and then lastly, we've got just one token, which is going to be of the Finale Dragon. This is actually an OCG Ultimate Rare that I've been using as a token for Nibiru. And it's so cool. I absolutely love it. I really cannot wait for the actual card to come out because this artwork is absolutely amazing. So that's going to be everything for the extra deck here. So let me go ahead and put everything away there, and then we're going to move on to the side deck. Now I have something to explain here when it comes to the side deck. So over here, you're going to notice that I've got triple Kashtira Fenrir. So essentially, when it comes to Fenrir, I've just noticed that sometimes it might be better to go for a more aggressive playstyle. And this is when Fenrir comes in, because he can search for himself very easily. He's kind of a hand trap because you can't special summon him. Like, if I control no monsters, I can just special summon him, which is really cool. I mean, it can happen for sure. So I do like that idea, especially if you're dealing with a bunch of board breakers. This card could definitely come in handy. And then his second effect is that he can banish monsters face down, which is really cool. So that means no effects after being banished. So this could just get rid of cards permanently, which is really cool. So I've been experimenting with this and have seen some decent success with it. So I really like having this on the side, honestly. And I think I will keep it there for a good while longer, honestly. So I like that. Next up is going to be Nibiru. I was still running Nibiru and my side deck before, so I am running triple copies. People do still like to play it around Nibiru just in case, so it looks like there's still that lingering fear going around, and I completely understand that too, because Nibiru is a pretty menacing card, no doubt, which is why he is in my side deck right now. Next up, we've got triple Mask Change 2. So Mask Change 2 is what helps me get into Dark Law. So what happens is that if I'm going against Tearlament or anything like that that is super graveyard reliant, immediately I would swap out Super Polymerization for Mask Change and then increase my chances of being able to get Dark Law. And then when that happens, boom, you have pretty much your win condition there. But there are still ways of getting over Dark Law, don't get me wrong, it's not foolproof, but this is still a very strong win condition, I would say, when it comes to certain decks, certain matchups, not always. Next, we've got Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Still very good when it comes to getting rid of back row and that kind of thing. If you really want to mess with Dark World players, then this is a great way of going about it. And then you've also got Dimensional Barrier over here. So this is actually really good against Exo Sister, since you can stop them from playing like that. And even Branded, if you honestly really wanted to, or if you wanted to do Tearlament to stop their fusions and that kind of thing. So I would say that my side deck is definitely pretty spicy, but I would say that it is a very strong side deck so far. I'm really enjoying Keshira, honestly, as is, so I have no complaints here, and I hope that Keshira stays at 3 for my sake. So now, with that said, I wanted to give you all a very special thank you, and I wanted to also announce that this is probably going to be the very last Despia related deck profile that I do in a while, and that is because I want to wait for Photon Hypernova to come out first to see what changes I end up making here, because I know that there are going to be some considerable changes to be made here for sure. But yeah, like so far, do let me know what you think about this deck, what you would change, what you would do differently. I am always open to feedback, because I think that you guys in the comments do help me when it comes to making this deck better. So thank you so much for all of your support. And if you like this video, if you like this build, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel, because more deck profiles are absolutely coming up very soon in the future. So with that said, until next time, have a wonderful night. Enjoy.